Montana Territory, August 1887. The sun had not yet cleared the peaks when Olivia Ellard stormed out of the general store, her cheeks flushed and her fists clenched tight at her sides. Dust curled around her boots as she crossed the street, her skirt catching on a nail jutting from a wagon hitch. She yanked it free without a pause. Folks had seen her cry before. They had seen her break when her father died, and again when her husband ran off leaving her with 2 small children and a debt he never mentioned. But today they called her a liar. "I am not a liar," she said to the empty street. Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed dry. Behind her, the door to the store slammed. Mrs. Holloway's voice followed like a lash. "You ought to be ashamed," saying something like that about a man like him. But Olivia kept walking. Her children were waiting. The little house she rented sat on the edge of town, its porch half falling, its roof patched with old feed sacks. Inside, 5-year-old Ada sat on a stool, brushing her brother Amos's hair into a wild mess while he giggled. Olivia forced a smile. "Did you eat?" she asked them gently. "We had bread and the eggs you left," Ada said, standing tall like her mother. Amos tried to eat his with the shell. Olivia laughed, the sound short. "Of course he did." She kissed both their heads, then knelt beside them. "I need you two to stay here a little longer. I will be back before the sun sets." Ada nodded, serious-eyed. "We will be good." "I know," Olivia whispered, and closed the door behind her. She walked west, past the last buildings, past the dry creek, until the land turned wild and open. And there he was, just like always on the ridge, mounted tall on a roan gelding, his hat pulled low and his eyes turned toward the sky like it might speak to him. Gareth Tolan. He had been her first friend in this place. The boy who helped her carry water after her husband left. The man who taught Amos to ride a stick horse and tied Ada's shoes when her fingers were too small. The one she had loved quietly since the day she arrived 3 years ago. And now everyone thought she lied about it. She climbed the ridge slow, the wind tugging at her hair. "Gareth," she said when she reached him. He did not turn right away, just looked out over the valley, where the wheat fields shimmered gold in the distance. "They think I said it to make you feel sorry for me," she said quietly. "They think I said it because I want something." Gareth finally turned. His face was weather-worn, his jaw rough with stubble, but his eyes were clear. "Did you?" "No," she said. "I said it because it is true. I love you. I always have." He did not answer, just looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time and did not know what to do with the sight. "I am sorry," she said quickly, backing a step. "I should not have said it. Her voice broke then, the words catching. "I needed you to know." She turned and walked away fast, faster than she meant to. She did not cry, not yet. That would come later, when the door was closed and the children were asleep. But halfway down the ridge, a voice cut through the wind. "I have loved you all along." She froze. His boots hit the ground behind her. She turned and he was there, right in front of her, his hat in his hands, his eyes wide and shining. "I never said it because I thought I was not enough," Gareth said. "I do not own land. I do not have much. I thought you deserved someone who could give you more than saddle leather and a rented horse. You give more than that every day," Olivia said, her voice shaking. "You give kindness. You give time. You give my children joy they would not have without you." He reached for her, slow like she might run. But she did not. She stepped forward and let him wrap his arms around her. And when she pressed her cheek to his chest, she felt his heart beat fast and sure. "I thought I would scare you off," she whispered. "You are the bravest woman I have ever known," Gareth said. "You cannot be scared off." She laughed, and it was the first real sound she had made all day. They stood there on the ridge, the wind lifting her hair, the sky stretching wide above them. And when he kissed her, It was not rushed or desperate. It was sure and steady, like it had waited years to happen and now would not be hurried. Later, at home, Ada watched from the porch as Gareth lifted Amos high into the air, the boy squealing with joy. Olivia stood beside her daughter, her hand resting light on the girl's shoulder. "I told you he would come," Ada said confidently. "Yes," Olivia said, her voice soft. "You did." Inside, the house was still small, still patched and worn, but it felt full now. It felt like a place where something real could grow. Gareth stayed for supper. He carved the bread and poured milk for the children and helped Amos wash his hands before eating. When the children were asleep, he sat with Olivia on the porch steps. The stars were bright above them. "They called me a liar," Olivia said quietly. Gareth took her hand. "Let them. I know the truth, and I am here." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You really loved me all along?" "Yes," he said, "with everything I had." She smiled, and for the first time in a long while, it reached all the way to her heart. The next day broke with a hush of fog and the scent of damp earth, thick in the air from the night's brief rain. Olivia stood in the garden behind the house, her hem soaked from dew, pulling up the last of the summer carrots. The soil clung stubbornly to their roots, and her fingers ached from the cold. A horse's slow steps approached behind her, not hurried, but certain. "I brought linseed for your mare," Gareth said as he tied his gelding to the fence. "Figured she was limping a little last week." Olivia glanced up, brushing her wrist across her brow. "I hadn't noticed. You were busy looking out for other things." He crouched to inspect the small paddock where her mare stood chewing in the shade. "She'll walk easier with softer joints." "I don't have coin for that." "I didn't ask for any." She hesitated, then nodded once. "Thank you." Gareth stayed quiet as he poured the linseed into a sack hung beside the trough. The mare wandered over, curious, and nudged his shoulder. He rubbed her nose with the back of his hand. "I was thinking," he said after a while, "there's a parcel of land east of the ridge old McKinnon's place. It's been sitting empty since spring. No one's made an offer." Olivia pulled another carrot, tossing it into the basket at her feet. "It's dry land. Dry but not dead. There's a spring under the south bluff. I found it last year chasing a calf." She looked at him carefully. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I put in a claim on it this morning." Her hands stilled. "You did. I want to build something. Not a bunkhouse or a line shack. A home. A real one." He stood and faced her fully. "I want to raise wheat. Maybe horses. I want there to be a kitchen with windows and a porch where we can sit in the evenings. If you'll have me." She leaned on the garden fence, eyes scanning the mist that still clung to the hills. "The children are part of you," he said. "That makes them part of anything I want." She let that rest between them, the words settling beneath her ribs like warm coals. He didn't press, just waited. "I'd need to see the land," she said finally, "before I say anything. I'll hitch the wagon tomorrow. We'll pack a lunch." They rode out at noon the next day, the children bundled between them with bread wrapped in cheesecloth and a jar of wild plum preserves. The trail climbed slow through cottonwoods, then opened wide to scrubland and a scattering of granite boulders. Gareth reined in atop a low rise. "There," he said, pointing to a dip in the slope where the grasses stood taller. "Water runs just beneath. You can see the green." Olivia stepped down from the wagon, the skirt of her dress brushing the ironweed. Ada chased a grasshopper while Amos tugged at Gareth's boot for a lift. Olivia walked alone toward the shaded bluff, where the air cooled and the scent of water rose faint but certain. She knelt, pressed her palm to the ground, and closed her eyes. "I'd build the house there," she said, standing. "The bluff would shield it from wind." And there's enough flat for a garden. Gareth looked at her with something quiet in his face, like reverence. I'm not afraid of hard work, she said. But I won't be looked at as charity. You wouldn't be. He stepped closer. You'd be my partner in all of it. She studied him, the dust on his collar, the freckles at his temple, the steadiness in his expression. All right, Gareth Tolan. He reached for her hand, warm and sure, and held it like it had always belonged there. I'll need to bring my sewing table. Bring everything you need, he said. We'll make room. That night, after the children fell asleep tangled in quilts, Olivia lit a lamp and began to stitch. The hem of Ada's dress had frayed, and her fingers moved with practiced ease. Gareth sat at the table, shaping a block of wood into a toy horse. I never asked, he said, not looking up. What made you say it then? That day. She considered the thread in her hand, then tied it off. I saw the way you looked at Amos when he ran to you. Like you already felt responsible for him. I did. I knew you wouldn't say it first. I didn't think I could. She folded the dress neatly. You can now. He set the carving down. I love you, Olivia. She turned to him, her face still, but her chest rising slow with something full and deep. I know. He reached across the table. She met him there, and in the soft yellow light, under the hush of the wind through the walls, they sat with hands joined, the kind of silence between them that asked for nothing more. By late September, the land Gareth claimed had begun to yield under their hands. They built in stages, each board lifted by both of them, each stone set with shared intent. The children stayed with Miss Cryer during the daylight hours, the widow down the road who took to Ada and Amos like they were her own kin. Olivia paid her in preserves and mending, and the woman never asked for more. The house stood framed now, roof pitched and rafters pegged, the walls open to wind and light. Gareth had shaped the beams himself, cutting from pine hauled down from the western slope. Olivia had chosen where the windows would go, her eyes trained east to catch the morning sun. That afternoon, Gareth came down from the bluff with his sleeves rolled and his neck damp from the effort of laying stone for the chimney. Olivia was bent over the hearth trench, squinting at the angle of the foundation. You've got a good eye, he said, setting a bucket of water near her feet. She straightened, brushing grit from her palms. I want the smoke to draw clean. No sense in coughing through every winter meal. He sat on a flat rock nearby, pulled off his gloves, and watched the light shift across the ridge. My father was a stonemason, he said after a moment. Spent his days shaping chimneys and wells. I used to bring his midday meal in a tin pail. He'd sit just like this, quiet, like the rock was speaking to him. Olivia eased down beside him, her skirt catching on a root. You never mentioned him before. He died before I left Missouri. Fever took him fast. My mother followed 2 winters later. I'm sorry. He looked at her then, his face unreadable. I never told anyone that. Not because it hurt too much. More because I didn't think anyone would care to know it. She reached for his hand, resting hers beside it on the warm stone. I care. He turned his hand to fit hers into his palm, then looked out again, his voice lower. I used to think if I worked hard enough, kept quiet and steady, then maybe I'd deserve something lasting. You do, she said. You deserve this. A hawk cried above them, wheeling over the ridge line. They watched it cut through the sky without speaking. Later, back in town, Olivia found Ada sitting cross-legged on Miss Cryer's porch, a scrap of muslin spread across her lap. She was stitching uneven letters with blue thread. What's that? Olivia asked, kneeling beside her. It's for the wall, Ada said, holding it up. So we remember. The cloth read, in crooked but earnest script, Our new house. Mama, Amos, Ada, and Mr. Gareth. Olivia blinked fast, her throat tightening. That's beautiful, sweetheart. I want him to stay forever, Ada said. He laughs with Amos and knows how to fix the broken things. Olivia wrapped her arms around her daughter. He will. That night, after the children fell asleep in Miss Cryer's front room, Olivia and Gareth walked slowly back toward the new house, lantern in hand. The stars were sharp above them, the air carrying the scent of dry grass and wood smoke. You ever think about what comes after? Gareth asked, his voice easy. After what? After we finish the roof. After the hearth is lit. After the first winter. She slowed her steps. I think about mornings. You in the chair by the stove. Me fixing coffee. The children chasing each other before the lights even touched the floor. He nodded, thoughtful. I think about teaching Amos to break a colt. Watching Ada pick wildflowers along the fence line. They walked a while in silence. I have something, he said, reaching into his coat pocket. It's not much. He held out a small silver pin, shaped like a sprig of forget-me-not. The edges were worn, the back slightly bent. It was my mother's, he said. She wore it every Sunday, said it reminded her not to let go of what mattered. I want you to have it. Olivia took it carefully, her fingers brushing his. I'll wear it when we stand together in that house as man and wife. His breath caught. You'll marry me? She smiled, not soft but sure. I already have in every way that counts. The rest is just the saying of it. He leaned forward, and she met him halfway, their kiss quiet and certain beneath the wide Montana sky. In the distance, the skeleton of their home rose against the dark, a promise shaped by their hands and sealed by slow, steady love. The first frost came early. Olivia woke before the sun. The chill already settled deep into the floorboards of Miss Cryer's front room, where they'd been staying while the new house was readied for winter. Amos had tucked himself tight against her side in the night, and Ada's small feet peeked from beneath the quilt. She eased out carefully, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and stepped outside barefoot onto the porch, where the grass snapped underfoot and breath came out like smoke. Gareth was already there, sitting on the edge of the steps with steam curling from a tin mug in his hands. He didn't look over when she sat beside him, but his shoulder pressed against hers in quiet greeting. You beat me up, she said, rubbing her arms. Couldn't sleep. Been thinking on the roof line again. It's not leaking. No. But I want it to hold a heavy snow. We might get it at the turn of the month. She looked out at the pale dawn. I've never minded snow. It's the waiting beforehand that gets me. He handed her the mug. Drink. It's hot. The coffee was stronger than she usually made it, but it warmed her all the way down. She passed it back and tucked her hands beneath her shawl. Miss Cryer said the stovepipe came in on the freight wagon yesterday, Olivia said. I'll go into town after breakfast. Get it before someone else does. I'll go. You've work at the house. I'd rather be the one to bring it back. He turned to her then. Some men still talk like they know what's best for you. I don't listen. You shouldn't have to hear it at all. She met his eyes. You think I haven't heard worse? He looked down at the cup. That doesn't mean you should carry it on your own. She reached for his hand and held it between both of hers. I'm not alone anymore, Gareth. I know that now. They sat that way until the sun broke the ridge and the frost began to melt along the porch rail. By midday, Gareth returned from town with the stovepipe wrapped in burlap and a length of stovepipe wire coiled at his side. He said little, but Olivia noticed the fresh tear at the cuff of his shirt and the scrape on one knuckle. She waited until Ada and Amos were playing behind the house, then joined him where he was shaping the base of the chimney's capstone. Did someone say something? She asked plainly. He didn't look up. Just old talk. I won't have you getting bloodied for my sake. I didn't swing, just didn't step aside. She crouched beside him, brushing brick dust from the edge of her skirt. Tell me. Man at the post office said I'd be gone by spring. That you'd be alone again, same as you were before. She didn't flinch. And you? I told him he didn't know what he was talking about. Gareth finally turned to her. I've never wanted anything more than I want a life with you, Olivia. You and the children. I'd lay stone every day until my bones give out if it meant holding on to that. She touched the scrape on his knuckle with her thumb. Then that's what we'll do. That evening they moved into the new house. The walls were still bare, and the windows uncurtained, but the stove held heat and the floor was swept clean. Ada picked dried yarrow from the bluff and set it in a chipped crock on the table. Amos dragged his quilt across the threshold and declared the corner beside the stove his spot. After the children were asleep, Gareth unrolled a canvas bundle near the hearth. Inside were 4 bent nails, a twist of wire, and a small wooden box lined with flannel. He opened it and held it out to her. Inside lay a gold ring, its surface smooth, the band slightly misshapen from years of wear. It was my mother's, he said. She wore it through every season. I want you to wear it now. Olivia didn't speak. She took the ring and slid it onto her finger, her hand steady. When we stand before the circuit preacher, Gareth said, we'll say the words, but I want you to know I meant them long before that day. She looked up at him, the firelight catching the silver pin at her collar. So did I. He reached for her hand again, and they sat on the floor beside the stove, the ring warm between them, the house breathing quiet around them. Outside, the frost crept in again, but inside, the warmth held. The cold held through November, clinging to the hills like a second skin. Olivia rose each morning with the coals barely warm and wrapped the children in wool before they stirred. The house creaked with wind at night, but the walls stood strong, and the hearth, now fully bricked and sealed, drew smoke clean and steady. They married the day before the first snow. It was a plain service, held in the back room of the mercantile where the circuit preacher rested when passing through. Gareth wore his cleanest shirt, the collar still stiff from scrubbing, and Olivia pinned her hair up with the only comb she owned that wasn't cracked. Ada carried a sprig of dried sage, and Amos clutched Gareth's hand like it was the only anchor in the world. Afterward, they walked home together in silence, the children skipping ahead, the light fading soft through the bare cottonwoods. Inside the house, Olivia laid the kettle on the stove and set to slicing what was left of the apple loaf Miss Cryer had sent with her blessing. Gareth stood by the window, watching the children press their noses to the glass and giggle at their own breath fogging the panes. When I was a boy, he said, I used to think love was something you found all at once, like striking gold. Now I know it's more like carving a trail. You keep walking it, even when the path's not clear. Olivia carried 2 cups of tea to the table. We carved ours by hand. He turned, his expression unreadable for a moment. I'd do it again, every step. That night, as the first snow fell in silence, Olivia stitched a quilt square by square, while Gareth sanded a cedar board smooth enough to hold the carved names of everyone under their roof. They worked without speaking, the quiet not empty but full. In spring, the garden filled in. Olivia planted rows with Ada at her side, teaching her how to space the seeds by the width of her hand. Gareth taught Amos how to tether the goats, and built a gate that didn't sag no matter how often the wind pushed against it. The townsfolk kept their distance at first, but time softened them. When Gareth drove a neighbor's runaway steer back across the ridge, respect followed. When Olivia helped deliver the Cooper baby in the middle of a thunderstorm, word spread that she was steady when it counted. By the harvest, children ran under the trees behind their house, and Olivia's preserves sold faster than Miss Cryer's at the stand outside the church. One evening, as the sun pulled long shadows over the porch, Olivia sat with her feet tucked beneath her, watching Gareth plane a piece of pine for the crib he was building. The boards were old barn wood he'd salvaged, worn but strong. "You think we'll have a girl?" she asked, running her fingers along the curve of her stomach, now beginning to show beneath her apron. He looked up, eyes resting on her gently. "I think she'll have your hands, the way they never stop working, but still know how to hold soft things. And if it's a boy, he'll follow you through the garden rows and ask questions you won't always know how to answer." Olivia laughed lightly, the sound catching in her throat. "You're sure about this? Another child? This life?" "I'm sure of you," he said. "Everything else follows." She stood, walked to him, and rested her hands on his shoulders. "We've made something real here." He looked up at her, the last light of day catching in his eyes. "We made a home." She leaned down and kissed him, slow and warm and unhurried, as the wind moved through the fields behind them and the scent of earth and wood smoke filled the air. Years passed quiet and strong. The house grew with them, a lean to added one spring, a second room the next. The children ran taller through the grass, their laughter echoing off the hills. Gareth taught Amos to break a horse without raising his voice. Olivia taught Ada to read using scraps of old newspaper and a hymn book worn at the edges. The baby, Ruth, came on a morning wrapped in mist. Gareth held her with awe, whispering her name like it was a secret between them. She had dark eyes that watched the world as though she had been waiting for it. One winter, Miss Cryer passed in her sleep. Olivia kept her chair, set it by the hearth, and told the children stories of the woman who'd watched over them before the house stood strong. As the years wound on, the ridge never changed, but they did. Gareth's hair grayed at the temples. Olivia's hands grew more lined, but no less certain. The quilt she'd stitched the first winter wore thin, but she patched it instead of replacing it. Some things, once earned, deserved to be kept. They grew old side by side, never needing to say what had already been proven in every shared task, every glance that lingered longer than necessary, every child they held and raised and let loose into the world. And in the quiet hours, long after the fields had gone still and the porch creaked beneath the weight of memory, they sat together, her with her sewing, him with his woodwork, and let the silence say what words never fully could. They had carved a trail where none had been, and they had walked it together all the way home.